Once bitten, they say, twice shy. Now, the hardship brought by the scarcity of Naira notes early in the year makes Nigerians to be wary of another situation. But the central bank has come out to douse fears over possible scarcity of cash in major cities across the country. As the December deadline for the transition to the new Naira policy approaches, the CBN has directed all its branches to continue to issue different denominations of old and redesigned banknotes in adequate quantities to deposit money banks for onward circulation to customers. The CBN also cautioned that all banknotes issued by it remain legal tender. So, Adewale, let me quickly come to you on this. Now, we understand, since we understand how things were during the time of Naira scarcity, we also hear reports that in some states in Nigeria, there's a little bit of Naira scarcity. Yeah. But what do you make of our reliance, on physical cash, when we should have moved into a digital cash transactions? What do you make of all of this?
Well, I think we experience technological failure. Our capacity to move from manual to digital transaction is a major problem. So we cannot pretend that we are there. We still have a long way to go. On the question of scarcity, the question is, do we really have Naira scarcity? I think the answer is yes. So we should now ask ourselves, there are so many signals that you know that there is scarcity of Naira. When you go to the ATM, for instance, sometimes you want to withdraw your money, you can't get your funds. And then sometimes you go to the bank, the maximum you can get, in fact, I think it's just 40,000 Naira, in a day. And then we also notice that many Nigerians these days experience transfer hitches. You send money to someone, and then for a very long time, the person does not get the money or does not even get the money at all. And then you start going to the bank to fill forms for months, for days. You don't get your money back. So for me, I think we should ask ourselves, why are we experiencing this problem? I think there is a problem of interbank politics of the economy itself. For instance, if you have ATM of Bank A, you discover that when you go to another Bank B, you can probably take 20,000 at a time in your bank. But when you take the same ATM to another bank, you may not be able to take as much as 20,000 Naira. And when your ATM gets stocked, let's say in a UBA, and your ATM is not UBA, then there is sometimes they even ask you to go and pay before you can get your... So Nigerians are now in a situation where if you are using Zenith Bank, you want to go to Zenith Bank to collect your money. If you are using UBA, you want to use ATM, UBA to go to, which shouldn't be so, because that defeats the spirit of online banking. Exactly. Then we also realize there is a problem of corruption. Some bankers are breaking cash, and then they give to POS operators. So that when you go to banks, you want to get money, let's say on weekends, you don't get the cash, then you go to POS, who most of the time build their tents very close to ATM shops. So I think it's also a function of corruption. And that's why we think that sanitizing the entire banking system is imperative for us to be able to deal with this problem. And I think it has to start with the CBN itself. That's why I think the bold step taken by the regime, in probing CBN, should not just be restricted to CBN alone. As a supervisory agency, it should be extended to other banks so that the banks can live up to their responsibility of performing financial functions in a way that meets global standards.
Indeed. And in terms of living up to its responsibility, Chris, when you look at the banking system in Nigeria today, many people still think perhaps, there isn't any need to go into the banks. We have the POS operators, just like what Adewale rightly pointed out. But then again, it raised the question of, do we have enough notes in circulation? And if that is the case, what is the CBN doing to address this concern?
Yes, whether we have enough cash in circulation is not for me to say. It's for the central bank to tell us. I don't work in the bank. I don't work with the central bank. It's only what we are told that we believe. Don't forget, during the period of changing of the currency, we had serious issues with this currency. And the central bank continued to tell us, oh, we have so much in the bank. The banks have, well, and you get to the bank and banks say, tell you that they don't have enough. But as it were, the issue as it were currently is the fact that there is a deadline for the withdrawal of old Naira notes. And that deadline is December. And just as we rightly mentioned in the intro, once bitten, twice shy. Nigerians have learned their lesson. For the first time in this country, we saw people buying money with money. For the first time in my life, where you use Naira to buy Naira. Never happened. Okay? So some people don't want to be taken unawares so that when it gets to the deadline, they will be safe. But the question you ask yourself is, what is central bank doing now to be able to make sure that we're having enough new currency in circulation? If you go to the banks, 90% of what you get are old Naira notes. There's no effort to make sure that these new Naira notes, which they redesigned or reprinted, whatever they call it, that we have it in circulation. Are we going to have this same problem of trying to rush when we start getting to that deadline? Yes. So I thought by now, CBN would. I personally felt by now that almost close to about 60% or 70% of the old currency would have withdrawn. You understand what I mean? About 70%, what we'll be having now are more of the new currencies than the old currencies, because December 31st is just less than how many weeks now? Just less than about 7 weeks.
So how can the regulatory agencies ensure that we have, smooth shift towards or distribution rather of the new banknotes? And
that is what I'm saying. That is why I'm saying that now we should have some kind of interface between the central bank and the commercial banks. Okay, by now they should ought to have been starting to ship in enough new currency into the commercial banks so that and start withdrawing the old ones, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where Nigerians went through hell during that period. In fact, it got to a point that, you know that some people committed suicide. You saw what some people were doing. Some women and men went to the bank, some went naked, some were. In fact, it was the height of it all. But I don't know, personally, I don't know whether the central bank has learned any lesson from if this December 31st, because it is not just going to be within the cities. We are talking of how this new cash can penetrate the villages, the remote areas, because it got to the point where central bank has to start going to villages to start distributing this currency. I don't think this should be this. So what I'm saying is, if central bank tell us that they have it, I have never been to the bank. I had a shortcut. Anytime I go to the bank, I want to withdraw. Yes, but we have to realize the fact that this issue, one, we should build on technology as ought to be. You will come to realize that you make a transfer these days, it does not hit the account of the person. The central bank came out with a policy that every transaction you make that didn't hit the account should be reversed within 24 hours, how many hours? Now you have to personally, there will be so many instances, I have to go to the bank personally after about 4 or 5 days to tell them that I made this transfer did not hit that other account. They say they will not ask you to fill a form. You fill a form and now start waiting. That is not the way to go. The fact remains that the central bank has to come out boldly. Rather than just say, oh, issue the old one, issue the new one. That was the same mistake they made last year that put us what. Now they should start, if they are still sticking to that December 31st deadline, then enough effort should be made now to start rolling out the new Naira notes so that we don't run into problems.
While we wait for the new Naira notes in circulation, Adewale, let me quickly wrap up with you in this. We're also told to embrace alternative methods. Which is, online transactions and all of that. But still, Chris also made mention of infrastructural, in rural villages not having access to infrastructure. So how do we marry the two if we're asked to, go through the alternative means of transaction and other communities don't have access to such facility?
There's no doubt that Nigerians are expressing a lot of difficulties in online transaction. I know a lot of people that have stopped using online transaction because of bad experiences they've had. Of course, we've seen so many video clips of people right there in the bank hall. You are there and your money is being withdrawn, and you can't trace who are the people that are behind them. So I think unless we have an efficient and effective transparent system, Nigerians will continue to lose trust, in the entire operating platforms. If you go and I bought medicine in February, I paid, the funds was declined. It took me several months before I could reclaim my money back. And a lot of Nigerians are also passing through the same problem. So what you are going to have is a situation where people will lose confidence, in the banking sector, and we go back to the primordial method of keeping their funds at home. So the banking system needs to know that even though they are private institutions, they are performing public functions. They need to build a system that will instill, that will sustain public trust. For now, there's a lot of distrust in the banking system. And I think this has to be addressed by the CBN. And that's why I hope that this probe that is going on will also take into consideration, the dwindling public trust in the banking system, so that we can have a better state that will guarantee sustainable economy.
Indeed, that's what came